Okay, so parents, listen up. This past week in one of the men's groups, we had a fascinating discussion about the nature of belief and certainty. And we talked about what can we be certain about and what's left to believe. Well, I took the position that when it comes to religion, no one can be certain, but everybody believes. No one can be certain, but everybody believes. And that caused a bit of a kerfluffle. No one can be certain of their religious convictions because no one has all knowledge, okay? Because no one is all-knowing, we're left to believe something about God. Now, the atheist believes there is no God. The atheist is not all-knowing and therefore cannot know for certain there is no God. Thus, the atheist believes. Likewise, the Christian believes there is a creator God who manifested in the person of Jesus Christ. The Christian does not have all knowledge and therefore cannot be certain, know for certain there is a God. Thus, the Christian believes. A central aspect of being human is that we have limited knowledge in most things. Therefore, for much of life, we are left to believe. We must believe. When it comes to religion, we must believe something. As human beings, we can't get out of it. We can't avoid it. When we wake for another day, we must believe something about life when we get out of bed. We base our life that day on some belief. To be human, therefore, is to believe. Now, I would urge everyone here to base their life on believing in Jesus of Nazareth. Now, that's my job, right? But deeper than that, that's my conviction and my certainty. When we raise children, we necessarily urge them to believe something about the world, about their community, about themselves, about God. When we do this through all aspects of our being. We do it with words, with admonishments, with the stories we tell them, and perhaps most importantly, we urge them to believe something about God through our actions. I therefore commend the parents of the children of St. John's for bringing them to church. All right, let me put my big preacher hat on right now, and I'll say this. And I urge you parents as a group to bring them to church more often. All right, big preacher hat off now. The mere showing up, who was it who said 80% of success in life is showing up? The mere showing up to church is a huge act of love on your part. The mere exposure of your children to the Christian story in the form of Sunday morning worship and instruction and Sunday morning community is just a small down payment on a fortune of belief. Who knows how God will use your sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving that comes in the form of bringing your children to church. Who knows how God will use that offering. When I was 30 years old and discovering the faith afresh, having been away from church for 10 years, though I was raised in the church, I was a good acolyte, I was in the boys' choir, I remember thinking in those first few weeks of re-engaging with the faith, how fortunate I was to have parents who took me to church. Because as I experienced church all over again as a 30-year-old man, I noticed how thoroughly odd church is. It's odd, isn't it? Can I get a witness? Church on Sunday morning is well out of the ordinary of what we experience the other 6 days of the week. As I began to re-engage with the liturgy, the worship style, the faith, I found it so odd and foreign that I realized that if I had not had some experience in church earlier in my life, I'm not sure I would have stayed with it. I realized how grateful that I was to at least be familiar with church, at least be familiar with it. And the only reason I was familiar with it was because my parents took me to church when I was a child. That simple familiarity, a familiarity given to me by my parents, was key. It was key to my reconnecting with the faith. And I'll always be deeply indebted to my parents for taking me to church. By doing so, they introduced me to abundant life, so that when I was ready to accept it for myself, and for me that came when I was 30 years old, I was able to do it. Now, once you get your kids here to church at St. John's, Tracy and I seek to do our level best to make sure that the Christian story is told and experienced here. It is vitally important that our children hear and experience the Christian story because, as you're well aware, they will and do hear all sorts of other stories out in the world. At St. John's, they hear the Christian story in Children's Chapel, they hear it in Sunday school, confirmation class, and they hear it in the worship. And they not only hear the Christian story, they experience it when they make Advent wreaths in community, when they carve pumpkins with folks of all ages, when they hang out at coffee hour with those same people, when they tell the story of the Incarnation at the Christmas pageant, when they serve on the altar as acolytes or at the front door as ushers, when they sit in the prayer vigil at the Garden of Gethsemane in our chapel in Holy Week. They experience the Christian story when they go to Haiti, when they give of their treasure to the church and the poor. And most deeply, they experience the Christian story when they come to the Eucharist. So today, on Youth Sunday, I say to you parents, bravo! Bravo for bringing your kids to church. Bravo for exposing them to the Christian story. Who knows how God will use your offering and sacrifice? And it is a sacrifice to drag your rear end out of bed on a Sunday morning after a long work week, battle with the kids to get them dressed, fed, and strapped into the car, and then go through the frustrations that can come from simply driving over here, and then be a bit on edge all morning as you watch your kids engage with the community. All the while, a voice keeps reminding you of how much easier it would have been if you'd all just simply slept in this morning. But remember always that your children will believe something. As human beings, they're hardwired to believe something. They might as well believe the truth. Don't you agree? Amen.